Welcome to the Principles of Success. My name is Nathan, and this is Season 1, Episode 28. And I've recorded this, I've lost count of how many times, because we are talking about one thing and one thing only today, and it is the compound effect. And I have no way of decently describing the compound effect. Basically what the compound effect is you're going to have to look it up. Look up compound interest, go to images, and there's a graph, and it basically looks like this. The compound effect is when the interest, the percentage of increase, is added to the total. That's essentially the best I can describe it. And mathematically, let's use money for it because its most common application is in financial terms and interest. Let's say you borrow $1,000 at 10% interest per day, just to make math a little bit easier. After the first day, you now owe $1,100. After the second day, because 10% of 1,100 is not an even hundred anymore, now you owe $1,210. The next day, you owe $1,330, I want to say. $40, something like that. But essentially, it keeps getting more and more. The reason why debt is so dangerous is because when you pay off your car loan, your mortgage, your credit card, most of what you are paying is interest. You borrowed $1,000, but you pay over time, you pay $10,000 because let's say your payment is $100. And I'm just back to that previous example. Let's say your payment is $100 and your interest increases by $100 every day. You can pay $100 over and over and over again, and you will never pay that debt off. You have to pay more than what the interest is compoundly, so that way you can pay off the debt. That's why not paying the minimum payment but more on your debt is so important. It's also super important not to get into debt, but we'll talk about more about that when we talk about money in a couple of months. But that's what the compound effect is, overly simplified. Another way that it is used to describe is you have 1 penny and it doubles every single day. So that would be 100% compound rate. And so that 1 cent turns into 2 cents. Well, that's not a whole lot of money, but over time, that 1 million will turn into 2 million at the same mathematical equation. And that's a whole lot of increase. And that's why the compound effect has been described by, I believe, Benjamin Franklin as the 8th wonder of the world. Compounding isn't linear, it's exponential growth. And outside of financial terms, well, let's talk about financial terms first. Because of the exponential growth of compounding, that is how a lot of people make money. And that's why it's super important to start getting into the money game as early as possible, because it gives it more time to grow and compound. If you invest $10,000 in your 20s, it'll be worth $1 million in your 60s. I'm generalizing, but that's an example. Or what's the word I'm looking for? I'm oversimplifying, but that's an example. It depends on your percentage rates, what happens, yada, yada, yada. But 10,000 million in 40 years, if you have it at 10% interest. Also, my numbers could be way off. I didn't do the math. This is off the top of my head. But that's in financial terms. In non-financial terms, the compound effect is basically slow incremental improvements that lead to massive changes down the road. So I love how the author of a book called The Compound Effect describes it in one of his speeches. I'm trying to remember his name, but I don't. But there's a book called The Compound Effect. I actually knew most of this before I ever read that book, but it was a nice consolidated information on this effect. But I like how he explains it in a speech that he gives, and you have three guys. You have one guy who just does a little bit more. You have the guy who's average Joe, basically. You have the guy that does just a little bit less. Well, after 1 year, the guy that does a little bit more, and the guy that does a little bit less, and the guy that's average Joe, they all still look the same. Because 1 penny doubling to 2 pennies isn't that much. But after 5 years, the guy who did a little bit more, he has great relationships, his finances are doing great, his health is doing great. Average Joe's average Joe. And the guy who's doing a little bit less, he's got a nice big gut, he's broke, his finances are screwed, he's getting a divorce, and all they did was change tiny little habits. The guy who did a little bit more made sure to tell his wife that he loved her a little bit more. He made sure not to eat out just 1 time less a week. He went for a walk every single day. That's just a short walk around the block. The guy who did a little bit less was a little bit less, he put a little bit less effort into his relationship. Not a whole lot, like he still was pretty close to average Joe. He started eating just 1 candy bar extra a day. He went to the restaurant just 1 or 2 more times a week. Not big deals. However, that compound effect over time had vastly different effects on people. That's why the compound effect is so powerful and so dangerous. That's why you shouldn't go into debt. That's why it's important that you know this effect, and why I wanted to devote an entire episode just to this one effect. Because it is so powerful. It can make or break you financially. It can drastically improve your results in fitness and health and wealth and happiness and relationships. All of that is affected by the compound effect. So, I'm not very good at articulating this particular effect. Many other speakers are much better at it, especially the guy who wrote the book called The Compound Effect. His name is Baron Hardy, and I am going to include one of my favorite motivational speeches by him in the Motivational Monday episodes. And because of the magic of batching, where I did all of this in 1 day, now instead of having to figure out when I'm going to post it eventually, it should already be up and running by the time you're seeing this. So go listen to The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy and read his book, The Compound Effect. But what I'm posting is the speech. Anyway, it's super important to learn this, and it's super important to know that your small incremental changes that you do throughout each and every day, that small amount of extra effort that you put in, the extra amount of work, has drastic effects down the road. If you could see what your bad decisions have compounded and your good decisions are compounded instantaneously, it would be so much easier to make those good decisions. But because we can't, we have to rely on what we think will happen. So that's the compound effect. Super important to knowing why it's important to work hard and how it will affect your life and throughout how your decisions now will affect your life. And I'm going to end that there, and I will see you all next week.